Welcome back to Story Hustler, Murder Mayhem, PTSD. It has been quite a while.
We have been on a bit of a hiatus, but we're back in the saddle. Story Hustler, Murder Mayhem, PTSD, the YouTube channel. A lot's gone on since we last posted. You graduated from college, did great. We're so proud.
Thank you.
And you had a great last year of basketball.
Appreciate the support.
And we're so, your mother and I couldn't be prouder. But more than anything, I am so happy just to have you home.
Yeah, it's really nice to be home.
Yeah, just like, you can occasionally reach out and make sure that you're safe.
Buddy.
Anyhow, but we've got a lot to talk about.
Oh my God, so much.
So future episodes about some of those topics and what your plans are.
No, that's
playing hoops
not
and whatever.
relevant.
But
the Netflix, we have to just jump into it.
That's what I'm saying. So it's sort of the topic that I think that we cannot ignore.
No.
And
keep sweet, pray and obey.
Or as your mother, I think, said, creep sweet.
I like that name.
Which is actually pretty funny
and
probably more appropriate for my dear friend, Warren Jeffs.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you and I watched, so we're talking, of course, about the Netflix 4-part series, Keep Sweet, Pray and Obey, which focuses on the FLDS church and specifically a man named Warren Jeffs.
Yes, we've watched this, and it is a crazy story.
I don't think since we watched this, I have asked you directly, what was your gut reaction?
My gut reaction. It's gross. It's a gross story. Like, it's creepy. It's just and like
the reason I'm interested is because many of these stories were sort of part of some of our dinner conversations.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why I found it interesting, because like this documentary really has brought light this story that a lot of people didn't know about, and it's just this weird thing that happened in history and no one knows about it. Like, I brought it up to people before and they're like, have no idea, and now everybody knows, and it's just kind of like, it's interesting. It's just, it was topics of dinner conversations when I was growing up, and it's just like, this story has been around my entire life, and I'm glad that like finally like it's getting some big recognition, because it deserves that, and these women and these survivors, they deserve that.
Yeah. So were you, let me ask you, because this is something I have been sort of thinking about, particularly the last couple of days. Were you disheartened at the end of that, or did you find some inspiration in that story?
I definitely found it inspiring. I mean, I loved that it focused on the women, and that it honestly was able to get so many survivors to talk. I mean, like, that's scary to come forward and talk about this powerful institution. Like, this man still has power to this day, even from prison. Like, that's not an easy thing to do. And so, I think it's a very courageous act. But I mean, we've talked about it before. Like, I think I loved the documentary overall and what they showed, and kind of like how it unfolded. But I do think that they missed a few people who came before that generation that helped lay the groundwork for these women, and it was one big movement. But there were these women that came before, like Flora and Ruth, and like the older sisters of the women that were interviewed.
Yeah. Well, that's
but not to take away from anyone that was interviewed. Like, it was incredible to hear what they actually went through, and to see it, like, them talk about it. It just shows the emotion, and like, it's crazy. Like, I mean, it was a cult. Like, they were just like brainwashed, and it's so crazy. I don't know. There's no other really words to describe that.
It has, as you, I think, have seen since I watched it, it has sort of provoked all kinds of emotions for me. Some of them, I find myself in quiet moments, in moments of rage, and thinking about some of what these young people have gone through. For me, though, this is when I ask you, did you sort of come away feeling positive or negative, which is obviously a wildly oversimplistic question. But the reason I ask, because for me, that, and maybe I know all the crimes, so they didn't, I knew what was going on. I knew the raping of these children was happening, and that informed my pursuit of this story, because it was pretty clear that was what's happening. But throughout this, I have been inspired by the people you're talking about.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I came away thinking, because the women that are focused on in this documentary, and their names deserve to be recognized: Rebecca Wall, Alyssa Wall, Alicia Rohrbach, Charlene Jeffs, and of course Ruby Jessup. And for me, this brings, what is that sort of, what do they say in the movies, that circle of life kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because I have pursued this story for your entire life.
Yeah, I think this was the first story I ever remember you covered.
Early on, and for a long, long time, one of my real running partners was Flora Jessup.
Yeah, and you guys would go and help girls.
Yeah, well, we raised a lot of hell together. And the beauty of this story for me now, just, as horrific as it was, and I've listened to a lot of podcasts and people talking about it, they're just shocked by the horrors. And, amen. That's, but being familiar with those, my takeaway was that you have this, the presentation of women who I think, this is my own little political campaign now, I want the state of Arizona to erect some sort of monument down at Wesley Bolin Plaza, the place in front of the Capitol where they have to recognize, war heroes and such, and other people who have impacted the state. And they should have a monument to a handful of women who really changed history, put this tyrannical prophet in prison, forever changed the way that town will be run. It will never be cult controlled again. And every bit of that was inspired, motivated by women. And I've been around long enough to have told the stories of now several generations, and the women presented in the documentary really, they're the ones who ultimately brought Warren down.
Yeah, and I think honestly, in this day and age, with what's happening with women and reproductive rights and just human rights in general, it's an inspiring story that we're powerful, we can rise up, we can make a change, we can do something.
Amen. Yeah.
And I feel like there's so much negativity, but I don't know, through all of the horrors and the crimes that were discussed throughout that docuseries, I felt like it was pretty uplifting. I mean, you have Alyssa riding her motorcycle throughout the documentary, she's just a badass. They're cracking open beers at the end. It just showed that they lived, they survived, and they're thriving now. And they say the best revenge is living well, and I can't say that they don't have, PTSD, because I'm sure they do.
Nobody gets out of there without scars.
No, but they just seem to have done so well.
Yeah, and that. I was talking to the director, a woman named Rachel Dretzen, who was the one who was interviewing me, and you came down and listened to some of that when we were doing this, shooting the long interview. And I was telling Rachel that I think that first of all she had done a remarkable job in putting this all together, and that I was ambivalent about getting involved in that.
I remember.
Project.
You were very skeptical.
Yeah, a little bit. And, for many years, I tried to give this story away, basically, by whatever research and material and video and interviews I gave it to everybody. Because it was my.
It was so important to get it out there.
Well, and that was my only weapon. I couldn't go beat these guys up or arrest them. It felt like but so I had the light of day was my ally, and when I was sort of on my own for a long period of time, I was trying to give this story away, and ultimately that sort of got me burned by a number of people, so I became more reticent about who I helped. But they came, and I expressed to Rachel that, you know, my concern is that this should not be the story of some, you know, knight in shining armor who came to the rescue. It's not some smart-ass reporter. It's not some private investigator, some, you know, self-serving, you know, famous author or somebody else. You know, I mean, in this story, the cops were the bad guys, the politicians were the bad guys. Most of the media was just ignoring the damn thing. Those who were not ignoring them, many of them were actively sort of supporting Warren Jeffs, politicians at our Capitol. And so, but the long and the short of it is that, you know, men and people in authority just betrayed this story and betrayed these women at every turn. And if it wasn't for the grit and the tenacity of people like Flora, you know, I get talking, I ramble on this story, but the beauty of this thing is, my favorite, I told Rachel, the director, my favorite scene in that film was when Ruby and Alyssa were cracking the beers on the patio, you know, and it made, you know, to think that what both of these young women have gone through together. They were on the same day forced into marriages, driven out to this little dump called Caliente, Nevada, where the Pligs went out and they had a hotel, and they married the young girls in Nevada because the laws were more lenient. They were going to come back to Utah, Colorado, or Arizona, but you know, these guys just had such a racket going, and to hear these two young women who were forced into these marriages. And then, you know, Alyssa leading to the prosecution of Warren, and then, you know, Ruby's story inspired her sister 25 years ago, you know, and this is one of the points I wanted to make, that the beauty, you know, to see Ruby now and to see her with her children and what a strong voice she is for this cause, you know. And I remember starting this, you know, 25 years ago, raising hell with her sister, Flora, who if people don't know her in history, none of this would have happened without the grit and tenacity and bravery of Flora Jessup, and I stand by that. But anyhow, you know, and Flora was one of the main primary movers and shakers to start things going, to start sounding the alarm. This is wrong. And why did Flora start all that 25 years ago? Because she was worried about this very sister who was being forced at 14 into a, you know, 14, 16, into a marriage, you know, badly betrayed when she left. Her story breaks my heart. But
I know, you're holding back tears right now.
But to see her and Alyssa sitting on that stoop, cracking a couple of Coronas and toasting each other, it made me cry, and I wanted to toast with them. And because, you know, I've just seen what the impact, and so in my, you know, in deciding to work with these folks, it really, I just wanted to make sure that don't make this sound like somebody came in and saved them or some authority figure. The men who were involved in this story, all of us, to a man, were merely doing our jobs and getting paid to do it. Granted, most of our colleagues were not doing their jobs, so we sort of stood out in that regard, but we were just doing our jobs. The people who brought all the change were Flora and Ruth Stubbs and Penny Peterson and Alyssa and Rebecca and Carolyn Jessup and some names, and their names, and Ruby and Charlene. I don't want to forget any of them, and Alicia Rohrbach. Yeah, you know. And then the beauty of it is, these women are out, and they've gotten their daughters out.
Yeah.
And again, one of the things that so inspires me about this, every one of the women who became crusaders did it not because they had lost their homes, not because they had lost their business, because they had gotten out and they were terrified what was going to happen to their younger brothers and sisters, what was going to happen. And so it was, you know, it was really the motherly love to protect. It was
never about them.
Never about them. Ruth Stubbs, whose case really, you know,
she's the one who set it in motion.
Set it in motion.
She was the first, like, case to get a guilty charge against that officer. right?
Rod home. But
Yeah.
you know why that started? She never wanted to go to court. She never wanted to charge Rod with any crime. She's 19. I've interviewed her in the
It's in the documentary.
And part of it's in the documentary. She's 19. She had just gotten out, escaped with the help of her sister, Penny Peterson, another one of the heroes here. Ruth is down here in Phoenix, and I interviewed her. She's quite pregnant with her third child. She's 19. She has 2 young children. She's just gotten out. And she tells the explosive story that Warren Jeffs had married her to a certified police officer who had 2 wives and about 20 kids when she was 16 and he was 32. Clear, statutorily violation of the law. It's a cop, and Warren put the marriage together. Ruth gets out of that, and she doesn't want to prosecute Rod. All she wants to do is get her kids out. And Rod wants to fight her for custody. And because she's, a 19-year-old mom, and they could, and he's a cop, he was going to win that case.
Yeah.
But she came down here, and again, she was not motivated by vengeance or putting Rod behind bars. She got out, realized how terrible it was, and was not about to leave her children in the custody of this crazy man and his cult, and fought for her children. And again, so, those are the stories that are, and you talk about, the people who spoke in this documentary were exactly the right people. They got the right people. They told the same right storylines. You get the sense of it, but there's so much more.
There is so much more.
These folks really stood on the shoulders of people, and they would acknowledge that, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm rambling about this now, but we got to talk about this for a couple of episodes, because I still
we got to go back to Colorado City.
It's interesting. Since this, a number of people
Have reached out to you, right?
Reached out, and some of these people, had a nice chat with Ruth, who will always be my hero, and a law officer friend, one of the Texas Rangers who was involved in the raid, became quite good friends with him, a fellow named Nick Hanna, who was one of the guys who testified, of course, in the Texas trial, and then during the big federal trial they had here. And it was nice to chat with Nick, and he saw him in the documentary, and he's now the sheriff down there, and he told me, even with my bad reputation, I'm still welcome down in Tom Green County in Texas. And I just want to say to Nick, thank you very much. He's a dear friend. And
It's good to know where you're welcome,
Well,
because honestly, you could be
spicy-
entering any place and you could be just
with my spicy reputation, this can get you
your
in trouble.
spicy reputation.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So anyhow, what again, if you were to tell someone, should they watch this?
Yes. Yes, 100%. It's something that happened. It's a part of this country's history. Like, it's important to know. And the thing is, it's not over necessarily. Like I said, earlier, Warren still gets his messages out. People still go to him in prison and talk to him.
Thousands of people.
Like, he still has power.
Yeah.
And there's new people that are kind of scary, who could rise up.
Right. For another show, perhaps.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later. But it's just scary because it's not like it's over. It's like some of these people got out, but there is still polygamy. There is still this culture.
And this is something that goes way back, and I've had this fight with a lot of the men up in that community. You hate polygamy. I think polygamy relegates women to just an inferior second-tier status, just inherently. But I never made my reporting, I hope, about persecuting people for practicing polygamy. I'm not some moral,
Hey, if you're a legal adult,
that's what
nobody gives a shit.
Yeah, if a number of women want to marry one of these knuckleheads,
be my guest.
If you're an adult, that's good. That's on you. But when you deprive your daughters and your sons of any sort of meaningful opportunities other than breeding stock, You know, and then you start impregnating them when
Yeah.
they're 12
And it's
13
getting younger
years.
and younger.
Well, it certainly did under Warren, and so you know those are issues. So I tried never to focus like I don't give a damn what consenting as adults do behind closed doors.
Yeah.
As personally or as a professional, I don't. That's not my business. But when you start raping kids and you just start abandoning boys and doing all this crap that we talked about for so many years, but. Bottom line is, I think they did a good job, and I think people should watch this thing. And I was proud to be part of it. And I told the director, Rachel Dretson, that I thought they did a masterful job. And my concern, and we argued for a couple of months whether I was going to do this. Make sure that if you tell history that somebody came and saved this or something. This has just been the blood, sweat, and tears of a handful of brave women who were born into, Rebecca Wall said it in one of her great poets, and I won't say it as eloquently, but, the beautiful irony is that, women were always the victims of this, and it was women who brought all the change.
Yeah.
And
That's a great quote.
That's sort of paraphrasing, but,
But yes, people should watch.
Yeah, okay, and I totally agree. I still want to rail against the politicians.
Oh,
name
I
names,
think we should.
The people who, because there were a lot of heroic figures coming from the crick, the women, but there were a handful of people who stepped up to the plate, politicians, a handful, but then there were a lot that did everything they can to coddle Warren, to take care of his thug cops, people down in our legislature, this guy that's in Congress right now, there's a lot of scoundrels in this that let all of this metastasize way out of control and would never do anything, and oftentimes stepped in to run interference for Warren and his rapist thug
Not
gang.
to get political, but
Right, let's get political.
well, it's the party of hypocrisy.
Yeah, but yes. A lot of
So it doesn't surprise me at all that everything that they accuse the other side of doing, they do themselves.
Isn't there some of that?
Yeah, but it's, we don't need to get into all of that right now. That's a whole episode in and of itself.
Yeah, okay, so, then there's just so many things that I thought were impressive and people opening themselves up and the voices in this. I give it a thumbs up.
10 out of 10.
10 out, wow.
Would recommend.
Okay, all right. So anyhow, Story Hustler's back.
Yeah.
At least as long as I have her here, so we're going to try to film a couple more shows. I think there's a couple more items that we should discuss with.
And
Keep
if you have
sweet,
questions or want
pray,
answers to anything.
and obey, definitely. And we realized that throughout much of our early broadcasts, we had all kinds of technical issues, and that's because I'm an idiot. And
We're hoping this is better.
we were doing it out on our patio, which I love, but
It's a little noisy.
there's a lot of insects flying.
The cicadas, man.
Oh my
They're
goodness.
everywhere. It's just a constant buzz. So we apologize.
Yeah,
we
but
hope
so-
that this is better.
Yeah, we're hoping this is better. We'll spiff things up a little bit, but just having you back spiffs it up. It makes it nicer. So.
Well, because we can do this again.
All right.
Yeah, Story Hustler, Murder, Mayhem, PTSD. We're back.
Peace out.
Like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.